Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Matt Everhart from Query. Great to see everyone again. We've been trying a few different things with the series recently, and I appreciate everyone's feedback. And some of the feedback was to bring some more expertise to the table. And so I am super excited today to be joined by Mike Rothman, who I feel like probably needs no introduction, but I'm
Oh,
going to introduce him anyway. So, Mike, great to see you.
good to be here, my friend.
It's so Mike and I go way back. So we're both based in Atlanta. I would say we met in probably like 2001,
Yeah.
all the way back in 2001, quite a while ago. But Mike has an incredible amount of security experience, both as a practitioner, working at cybersecurity companies, doing research and serving as an analyst, founding a cloud security company, building and delivering a lot of training. Like the list goes on and on. We only have 45 minutes, so I'll
Yeah.
probably cut it there. But really excited for the conversation today. And I first met Mike when I was actually a customer of a company that he was working at. And they asked me to do some webinars and some work with them. And Mike, you gave me some tremendous tips on just how to represent myself better,
Yeah.
not talk so much, be a little more clear. So I
Well, all
appreciate
right. Well, if you learned something out of that, Matt, that's all good.
it.
But so as you're going through that whole thing, the only thing that kept resonating in my head was, God, you're old. I mean, God, it's like I've known you for, over 20 years, and it's just like I've done this, that, and the other thing. It's like, man, I'm tired, right? That just makes me feel tired, how much stuff we've done and really how the industry's changed. So I'm excited for the discussion to really kind of talk about, the role of security data and how we get our arms around it and really just where a lot of the trends and directions of the market are going.
Yeah, no, I think that that's great, and that's really what I was hoping to dig into today with you is you've been watching this movie for a long time. You've been seeing how security operations has evolved, both the technology, the process, our approach to people, and I think it's interesting. It's one of those stories that I feel like a lot has changed and nothing has changed, and so I'm curious as I was kind of thinking about where to start the conversation with you, I kept going back to the first time I think we like really professionally worked together. You had produced a study, and this was back in like 2007, that looked at like the effectiveness of security logging from quite a few angles. It looked at the what logs to store, how to store them, what technology, what the process should look like, the jobs to be done around it. And I had a similar response to you. I'm like, wow, that 2007, that was a long time ago. But a lot has changed, but maybe nothing has changed. So I'm curious, how you remember that?
Yeah, it's funny because back at that point in time, there was a lot of focus on like workplace factors, right? Kind of what are people doing? How are they spending their time? How do we optimize that? How do we really, improve efficiency was kind of what a lot of the focus of that was. So we started, looking at basically the process of security monitoring. We didn't call it that back then, probably just logging
Yeah,
back. But it was really kind of to decompose that process into all of its different fundamental aspects so you could really get a sense of, what it was costing you and how do you really, try to optimize that. And obviously the company you were with at the time, they had a vested interest in trying to, kind of discuss leverage and how much, kind of aggregation and leverage, really led to that. But it is interesting that little nuance of, everything is different, but it's still the same.
yeah,
And I really think that's the case, right? The blocking and tackling that we continue to have to do is pretty much the blocking and tackling. Yeah, is there more stuff? You bet, right? Is it
yeah,
just, kind of distributed all over the place? 100%, right? Cloud wasn't a thing back in 2007, And now we've got data all over the place. But listen, at the end of the day, we got to understand what it is that we have. We got to understand, how it's being used. We got to understand, when it's possibly being misused, and we got to understand, how to address some of those potential misuse types of activities. So the pieces on the playbooks have gotten more detailed. They've gotten, bigger, but ultimately the outcome that we're looking for has remained remarkably consistent, which is try to find the adversaries and the bad actors in your environment and try to do that before they make off with all your stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like you said, it's gotten more complex. There's certainly more pieces and parts these days, but I think there's something in there that I'll pull on a little bit. I think there's an element of hygiene underneath all of that, and we continue to see that those that are good with the basics, as you said, that serves you very well. Like if you're able to really, do some of what seems like simple things, but they're often not simple because you have to do them across now this increasing amount of technology, increasing amount of complexity. So what do you think about that when it pertains to security operations?
Well, I can, certainly tell you that it is a far more complicated environment today that we're dealing with. There's a lot of moving pieces, but more importantly, a lot of those pieces are not within our control, right? So this idea of monitoring, this idea of trying to get a handle on what's actually happening in your environment, even though it may not be something that you totally control, becomes absolutely paramount, right? Take your just typical, I mean, most enterprises of scale, right? They're doing a whole bunch of Microsoft 365 now, whether they like it or not. So
Right.
you've got a whole bunch of stuff, which your most critical data is out there somewhere where you don't really know where it is. So you have to really think about, okay, what telemetry is available to me? How do I basically ingest it into whatever system I'm using? How do I figure out what's legit, what's not legit? What kind of rules do I put in place in order to make, that kind of stuff happen? And again, a lot of it just gets back to we have more things to manage, but what we're trying to do continues to be, again, remarkably consistent. We just have to do it at much higher scale. And that's
Yeah.
something that, again, creates very significant challenges. And I really don't want to trivialize the fact that hygiene is manageable, right? I do a bunch of work with a company with about 15 people, now. That's one of the places I spend a lot of my time. And you know what? It's a hassle to enforce hygiene, kind of
Yeah.
to make sure everybody's doing the right stuff, but it's manageable, right? If I got 15,000 or 150,000, right? Those problems are totally different. So hygiene at scale is a lot harder. Analyzing all this data at scale is a lot harder. So, the bigger you are, the more you have to really rely on that data, the more you have to rely on the tools and really the detections to understand what's really happening in your environment. And that's really where we have moved the ball, right?
Yeah.
Is it good enough? Of course not, right?
Yeah.
But have we really made a lot of progress in terms of being able to aggregate data at scale? Yes. Analyze that data at scale? Yes. Provide, again, consistency in terms of those policies and enforcement with some measure of operations and automation? Yes. Right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not still not good enough because the adversaries continue to get better. The
Absolutely.
applications continue to do stuff. And by the way, the other thing that we all have to deal with is the fact that we still have users and they will continue to click on things regardless of what it is that we tell them not to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's an interesting cycle that repeats in security and in a lot of industries where things get more and more complex as you're solving a problem until it gets to a point where it's drastically simplified. And then that's often when you start to see significant adoption and
That's
really
right.
problems being
That's right.
solved. And I've actually been thinking about a series on how to simplify the complex and how those things happen. But we'll leave that for another day. You opened up an interesting door that I want to push open, and over the last 5 or maybe even 10 years, I'm not very good at sense of time these days, but
None of us are.
there's been trends in the security market where it kind of felt like, particularly from the marketing and conferences, that the market was pushing toward like one platform to rule them all. And, I know I'm pretty close to the market and security ops. And so I may be seeing things that are starting to emerge, but it feels to me, going and talking to lots of large enterprise and mid-enterprise security teams, that there's kind of this realization that security platforms are actually now almost like all around us. To your points earlier, you're going to have two or three at least. A lot of people have more than that. You add in the IT platforms and other platforms, and it gets to be into the almost dozen range. And so you said earlier, like, you've got to still be able to prevent, detect, respond. You've got to do the hygiene. How do you think about this emerging platform everywhere trend?
Well, so it's I think plural, right? Platforms everywhere, and that's the
Yes.
thing that you talked about, right? I've got a network security platform, and again, regardless of who you use, they've got enough different solutions that they fancy themselves to be platforms. You've got an endpoint platform in terms of how do you deal with all those devices that you have. You have a cloud platform in terms of actually probably multiple cloud platforms, right? Because everybody's
Yeah.
doing multi-cloud. So yeah, and that's just three or four or five right there, right? And that's not even getting into application layer stuff or database and platform as a service, layer stuff. So you've got really things that are all over the place. And when you go into that kind of overwhelm, the indication and really the inclination is to simplify it, shut it down, just put everything in one place, and then I know where it is, and I can, start to analyze that. And that works great until you get to scale. Right. Then you start thinking about, wow, this is actually a lot of data. Holy smokes. And it's not even the compute to deal with all that data. It's the storage, right? The storage of that data is going to kill you.
Yeah.
So, and again, we have to start thinking about in terms of let's remember what the outcome is, right? We need to be able to detect bad actors in our environment before they do damage. Now
Yeah.
we can talk about response, we can talk about that, but ultimately that's the crux of
Yeah.
what the security professional has to do. And again, so then I got to start thinking, what's the most effective way to do that? A way to do that is to aggregate all this data. But I think what we've proven is even though the back-end data models can now support a massive amount of scale, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yes.
Right. And again, and a lot of it just gets back to what am I really gaining from aggregating all this data besides a huge ass cloud storage bill if you're using, cloud storage from that front. So
Yeah.
it's really, and one of the interesting things about what you guys are doing, Matt, is you're really kind of challenging that assumption, which is, can I get you to the outcome without having to actually move all of that data and its associated storage and transport and really management costs around that. And I think that's really a question that everybody needs to start to ask, which is, yes, I've had this model since 2008, right, when early kind of ArcSight started showing up. Let's just put all the
Yeah.
stuff there. And I think we really have to challenge that now, because I don't think it's feasible to do that at scale given all the different pieces that are there nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's largely how we came to query and the things that we're doing, right? As we saw these pains around accessing, searching, understanding data that's all around us. And, look, we don't pretend to be, a silver bullet or the one solution to rule them all. Like, there's still reasons when you might want to screen, might want to have some centralized data. You mentioned detections and things like that. So yes, absolutely. But the ability to be able to understand what's happening inside of all of these platforms and all the places that your data lives, like, it's crazy how complex that's gotten. I mean, we've gone from, security operators having to not only like understand all these different platforms that they have, but now, they're being asked to learn SQL and KQL and all these other languages. Like, the list just, keeps growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's really a fairly fundamental idea, right? Your security practitioners are going to ask questions and they need to understand how they can get the answer to those questions, right? And sometimes those questions can be answered because I've got all the data centralized, and that's great. Sometimes you're not. So, do I decentralize that data? Do I federate that data? So these are the discussions that security architects really have to start thinking about, because the way we're going, it ain't going to scale. Right. If
Yes.
not to the degree that we need to, everybody's running into the same thing. I don't care who your back end provider is. You're all getting challenged by finance in terms of, how much money can we continue to spend on that stuff? You're getting continually challenged by the responders and the ops folks in terms of, I need better response time. I need more data in this thing. At some point, you're just like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
we curate the data, right? Well, that's just saying, well, I'm going to minimize the amount of stuff I'm putting into the back end so I don't have that to analyze. So the model at some point falls over, right? So the question is, what's there out of the ashes to really rise? And
Yes.
again, I think that there's a lot to be said about, kind of what Query's doing relative to, kind of federated search on that, because it's about the question, right? How do I answer that question? Because there's going to be multiple data sources that I need in order to get a comprehensive, complete answer, to
Yeah.
those specific questions. And again, I think that's what folks really need to be, starting to think about.
Well, thank you for that. The team here is very passionate about helping people get answers to their questions. You said about being outcome driven, and we get the opportunity, which I tell you has just been so much fun the last couple of years. But we get the opportunity to work with some really forward thinking companies and their security programs. And one of the things that I've noticed that seems to be different about some of these security programs is that they are very mission driven when they're thinking about bringing in a new piece of technology, or they're thinking about adopting a new platform or whatever it is, really thinking through like, how and where are we going to use this, and what problem does it really solve? Like almost the introduction of any new technology, including query, like changes the process around how teams work. And so really thinking through how all of that comes together, I think is something that I've noticed, that it seems like there's some maturity kind of coming in our industry around that, at least how some teams approach it. And I think that's a big step in a positive direction.
Yeah, my business partner, Rich Mogul, kind of says, the future is here. It's just unevenly distributed. And I think he stole that from Heinlein, or, one of the sci-fi authors. So I guess I shouldn't credit Rich with that, because he stole it from somebody. But it's true. Right.
Yeah.
And the fact is, yes, there are some folks that really have taken what I'll call a playbook centric approach to their security ops, which is they're designing how they want their environment to work. They're not just letting it happen. They're not just strapping the fire, extinguisher to their back when they wake up in the morning and, figure out what's on fire from that standpoint. So they've got, again, a perspective that this is how I want the environment to work. These are the specific triggers where if this situation happens, this is what I want the, set of activities to actually happen, kind of on the back end of that. I guess really the sad truth of that is, Matt, it's not enough people,
Yeah.
right? It's just not enough people. So most folks just, kind of muddle through their day. They deal with the alerts as they come in, not enough of them, right? When something is proven to be an incident, all hell breaks loose, and they get consumed by that, and they wash, rinse, and repeat, because they're never able to get out ahead of that and be, much more strategic from that perspective. So, this idea of building these playbooks, this idea of understanding the data you need to trigger those playbooks and the context that's required in order to truly remediate a lot of these activities, that's where it all becomes, really kind of a codependent environment. Because most folks are just like, hey, we throw the alert over to the SOC's got to deal with it, and then the responders go in, I'm there, and I just wash my hands of it, right, once the alert fires. Well, no, right? If you can't complete the swing, which is something that you tell me, all the time, like, we got to complete the swing. If you can't complete the swing in terms of really taking something from detection all the way through, validation, kind of response, and then ultimately remediation, you're no better off than you were before, right? So all this stuff really kind of works together. But again, the good news is a lot of organization has pioneered how to do this. So it's not, this mysterious, kind of art of magic anymore, right? I mean, we know how to do this. The question is just, are you going to put forth the effort? Do you take the time? Are you going to get the funding and really the attention
Right.
internally to, turn your what had been a very reactive security operations environment to, I'm not going to say proactive, right? But once much more orchestrated is probably a better way to phrase that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. That's great. Well, in the interest of giving credit for stealing things, the complete the swing I stole from Kevin Haynes, who joined us a couple of weeks ago on the show. So it's one of my favorite Kevin sayings.
We all steal from everybody. So it's
That's
just we
right.
got to be
That's
careful with attribution, but for sure that is something. All the years we've been friends, that's the one thing that I keep. Every time I think of all the stuff I've left on the floor half done, right? Just like Matt would like kick my butt on that when I didn't complete the.
Totally right. I love it. I love it. Well, so there's a couple of questions from the audience that kind of push into the combination of using data and AI. So before I get to the questions, I'll ask you, AI and security, do you think it's helpful or do you think it's hype? And I'll maybe put a little bit of parameters around how you answer. Like I'd love to hear your thoughts on help or hype for like right now. We're getting ready, a lot of us are getting ready to go to RSA. A fun game to go around the RSA showroom floor is to kind of figure out what the buzzword of the year is going to be. It's almost most certainly going to be AI and LLMs in particular this year. But I'm curious, like playing in right now, do you think it's help or hype? And maybe into the future, what do you think?
Yeah. So the answer is yes, right? For all of the above, but let's separate it out, right? Machine learning, that aspect of AI has been something that has been prevalent within security products and security capabilities for 7 to 10 years, right? I
Yeah.
mean, any kind of detection engine has been built and trained on, kind of machine learning models, and that's a form of AI. Really,
Yes.
where we get into, kind of the interesting stuff is when we start talking about generative AI, right? And the ability to, take information, analyze that information, and then based upon how the model has been trained, get some kind of answer to, again, a question that you're asking from that standpoint. And I think that, even today, generative AI is having a significant impact on security operations in terms of just context, right? I mean, how much time do we spend, saying, hey, I got this specific error message. What the hell does that mean? Right? I'll go Google it and then, try to read 50 crappy links. And then before you find the thing that you really want, well, pumping that, making an API call to, your favorite LLM, you end up with what's a reasonably decent contextual answer to a lot of the stuff that shows up in our interfaces. And that's available today, right? We're starting to see things like Microsoft Security Copilot show up, and that's, getting analyzing some of the data, kind of using that to develop some trends and give you a sense of what's really happening. And that is, really scratching the surface. I know CrowdStrike has one that works as part of their platform as well. I forget what the hell they named it in Lisa or something, kind of cutesy
Yeah.
like that. So we're starting to see how generative AI is really going to streamline the process for experienced people and up level the capabilities of not experienced people. When we think about, kind of the real impact that we need to happen in this environment of security operations, it really is both making sure that the folks that know what they're doing can do more of that and take the folks that don't really know what they're doing and up level them to the point where they're somewhat functional. Because we'd always make jokes, right? Security folks that come in, but they're just awful at their job for the first 4 or 5 years, right? Because
Yeah.
they just don't know enough. It's not how smart they are. It's not, kind of the capabilities that they come with. It's not, the training that they've had. It's just the world of experience that you
Yeah.
need in order to be an effective security professional. And if generative AI can really help us accelerate that process, it's going to be huge, right? And that's not even talking about the ability to analyze, large amounts of data and find patterns that, you didn't know actually existed. It's really just giving me some context of what's happening in my environment.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And as we move towards really this code-based universe, right, where everything's in cloud, everything's in code, infrastructure code, all this other stuff, the ability for generative AI to actually build code is going to make a huge difference. And I saw a demo of this at last year's RSA, right? So a year ago, I saw a demo of this. One of the CSPMs or somebody had, something where on alert things, it says, hey, kind of click this button, and you got code for how to remediate each of those issues on 4 or 5 different platforms.
Yeah.
A year ago, I'm like, oh my God, somebody's actually going to use that code. Run, right? But now, a year later, you're starting to see the effectiveness of, kind of some of these tools and how they've matured. A year from now, it's probably going to write decent code,
Yeah.
right? And for sure, double check it, make sure it goes through a process, QA it, run it through your pipeline as you need to. But at the end of the day, that's going to make such a huge difference in terms
Yeah.
of how we do security ops. I mean, it's very exciting.
I agree. I agree. I think if we borrow some of what we're seeing in the engineering world, where the AI powered co-pilots are really helping the skilled engineers do things faster, right? Be more effective, be more efficient. Like I think we're seeing some gains there. I think, to your point, it is, back to what we were talking about earlier with complexity. Becoming a cyber security analyst or operator, it's a big lift. Like our CISO Neil Bridges runs a great community, cyber insecurity, and he helps people break into the field. And I think that's one of the things that I have noticed, that I'll hear people that he talks to that have done it. They've broken into security, and then they're going back and giving tips. They're almost always say, learn as much as you can, like be constantly learn. Like it's a lot. And so I do think that there's a lot of promise.
I love the fact you used the term break in, because it just reminds me like somebody, okay, I broke into the security business, and you're like, oh crap, do I even want to really be here? And the cops are about to come here, and I'm just like, it's just like it's really apropos, because a lot of folks think, oh my God, it's great, and there's so many jobs and all this other stuff, and then they get here and they're like, what have I gotten myself into? But
Well,
I do
it's
think
a tough industry. I would say you can tell. I mean, Mike's only 32 years old, and it's so hard that his hair is all white. So
unfortunately, I have T-shirts that are 32 years old, but we'll stay that way for.
So I'll pivot to you open the door to this, and I go in a slightly different direction, because I do think this is an interesting topic. Like, if you think about the imagery associated with our industry, like there are lots of hoodies and kind of hacker images for a while, and now when I see a lot of people talking about security, I even saw something on CNBC the other day. They were basically representing the entirety of the security industry as like super stressed out, like just like everybody was one step away from having to pay a Bitcoin ransom and losing their mind. And so I think there is a lot of stress in cyber, but I think as I've worked with you over the years, I mean, I kind of remember you as being more stressed out years ago. Like you're kind of like my picture of Zen these days.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what do you think about managing stress and cyber? Maybe maybe you share a little on how you do it personally and how you see the trends in the industry.
Yeah, one not having an operational job anymore really helps. So I'll say that. Now, obviously, that's not an option for everybody from that perspective. So I'll be honest with you, right? Kind of probably, I guess it was close to 10, 12 years ago at this point. I personally got to the breaking point. I was just very, very unhappy in everything that I was doing. I was questioning all of the decisions that I'd made, throughout my life. I was really leaving no stone unturned. And I'll say, and this may sound trite, and it may sound, just kind of recycled, because it's been, the subject of a lot of discussion. But I'll tell you, a mindfulness practice made all the world of difference to me, right? And actually, in 2014, a colleague of mine named Jennifer Manella, we did a presentation at the RSA conference that way about we called it neuro, kind of science and really how to get on top of it, burnout, within the security environment, and a lot of it got back to basic fair mindful practices, and I don't care what they are, right? If you want to sit on a pillow for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes a day, that's great. If it's being out in nature, taking a walk and just kind of shutting things down, that's fine. I mean, nowadays I've become a big kind of indoor rower, so I sit on my rower for 45 minutes. I don't have podcasts on. I just hear the swish 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 of kind of the water, and that's my kind of personal meditation now. But what it does is it gives you the ability to separate from the environment, right? And when you're in the fight every day, right? When you're kind of again the to-do list you can't possibly get through, and then somebody goes and screws something up, and then you're in a response situation, you're working all weekend and late at night, and if you can't separate out from that situation, I mean, you just consume yourself, right? So it's really critical that you have whatever practice it is, that you have. Go to the gym, right? Go for a run. I don't care. It doesn't matter. The specifics don't matter. The fact that you have and you take time for yourself and you protect that time. Because I'll tell you, regardless of what you do in security, it's going to consume you, and you can work 20 hours a day if you want to, and only 4 hours a day because I'm assuming you need to sleep at some point, right? If you don't, it'll take that too, right? So you have to build in to your kind of workflow and your day-to-day activity time for yourself, because if you don't, you will not last long in this business. And you'll, kind of say, they're all crazy. I don't understand how these people do it. Well, they do it because they're able to take a step back and not kind of totally identify themselves with the situation. And,
Yeah.
when you start taking it personally because some knucklehead clicks on the wrong thing and ends up, kind of inflicting, some type of incident and situation in your environment, you start taking that stuff personally. And again, there's no winning that game. There
Yeah.
really is.
Feels like that always happens at 4 o'clock on a Friday, doesn't it? I don't know why. Yeah,
It's usually 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday of a holiday weekend. So
exactly.
that's evidently the adversaries and bad actors don't take kind of Labor Day or Memorial Day or any of those other holidays that we really enjoy. The nerve of them.
That's right. That's right. Well, I know I have been able to attend a number of your sessions over the years, and that one you're talking about RSA for, I think you said 2014.
Yeah,
I
a
I
couple of
was that taught me a lot, and I know a lot of people in the industry. In fact, I was talking to one literally this morning that referenced that as kind of a turning point for them. So you've contributed a lot over the years, but I think it's not just on technical and architecture. It's taking care of each other, and taking care of each other starts with taking care of yourself, right? So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Well, this has been great, Mike. I really appreciate it. I will say, I'm a big believer in having what I call a personal board of advisors or personal board of directors, and you're definitely have been one for me for many years. You definitely help keep me sane. You talk me off the ledge. I love that you push on me when I'm not doing or thinking about things right. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for all your contributions to the industry. And it was really great and a lot of fun to talk to you today.
I'm flattered, but I do have to say I learn from every interaction that I have. So it really is a two-way street. And yeah, I'm an old guy and I've been there, done that, screwed it up, have 40 t-shirts that tell me how I screwed all this stuff up. But that's really what it is. It's resilience, right? It's the ability to make mistakes, to move forward, and to learn from them. And that's the message I try to impart to my kids. That's the message I try to impart to, all the people that I've been, again, gracious and grateful enough to work with. And that's how I try to live my own life. Right. So security is a game that you can't win ultimately. Right. It's like going to the casino and thinking that you're going to win every single time. It just doesn't work that way. right? Security, so what you have to do is really kind of get your arms around the reality that it is about doing the best you can with what you have at this given time, learning from what doesn't go right and moving forward.
Yeah.
It's really as simple as that. And again, it took me decades to figure that out, kind of in my career. So if anybody out there can get a little bit of value from that, then my work is done.
No, it's great. I mean, well said, right? I mean, resilience and adaptability. I mean, it's kind of what it's all about. And I'd say, the last 5 years or so, it certainly has taught me a lot about resilience and adaptability, and trying to just get a little bit better each and every day. If you can get just a little bit better, it adds up. So, well, thank you very much, Mike. Really appreciate it. We will post the link. I think that the RSA talk that you mentioned, I think it's on YouTube, isn't it?
It is. It is. I'll get you the link if you don't have it, because I think
Yeah,
that
we'll
would be great
post
to
it
put
on
in
the
show
Query
notes.
website, because it really is. It's a great one. We'll post it on the Query LinkedIn page. So awesome. Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. See you later.